Hey there, folks. This is Jay Frost, of course, speaking to you from the helm of the Philanthropy Mastermind series. A little tongue-tied today for some reason. Really happy to welcome you here. And this is going to be a fun session that is definitely geared to something that's a problem or a challenge, or maybe the fun part of your work. In every office, for every not-for-profit organization that's trying to figure out how to make sure that they are clearly, passionately articulating their case for support. And before I get into that and introduce today's guest, I, of course, want to welcome you here and want to give a shout out to our sponsor of this series, which is DonorSearch. I'm sure you saw that when you got an invitation to this or saw it on the internet. And of course, we won't be talking much about DonorSearch today, but don't go away. If that's your interest, you'll find plenty of information on their services and about your donors over at DonorSearch.net. And under the resources tab, you'll find lots of information about this series, which they've been generously sponsoring since 2016. And if my math is right, this is episode 583. So lots of content there. You can find both webinars and webcasts or credit or conversation or instruction for sharing to your teams, and also the podcast series, which I'm sure you'll find really very interesting as well. All of that's available for you at donorsearch.net. And again, once you're there, I hope you'll check out what they offer in terms of intelligence solutions when it comes to knowing the people who love our missions just as much as we do. Now, of course, today we want to make sure you're a part of this conversation. And I really stress that because there's not going to be a lot of slides thrown at you. This will be a conversation on, of course, the 5 pitfalls to a successful case for support and how to avoid them. And in order to have that conversation really be real, our guest, of course, will be sharing from his vast experience doing this with over 100 organizations at Campbell and Company. But also we can draw from your experience, the problems and challenges that you've had. And so do use both the chat and the Q&A to be a part of this conversation, if you would. I know that a couple of you have already said hello, which I really appreciate. So thank you, Gail. Thank you, Elizabeth, for warming up the chat. We really do appreciate that. And if others would join them, we'd really love that as well. So I know that Sarasota and Dallas are represented in the room today, and that's awesome. Hello, Daniel, and I know where you are because you always win the Travel Distance Award. If others among you would like to say hello, hello, Sherry, hello, Meredith, please do say hello, and maybe which part of the country you're in or which part of the world, in Daniel's case, and maybe which organization you're with. We would love all of that information. And then later, if you want to share maybe some of the particular issues that you're running into with your case statement, anything from what is it to how can I make it work, make sure that you're using the chat or Q&A to do any and all of that. So with that very long preamble, I want to finally welcome Andy Brommel. Andy, thank you so much for being here. It's great to see you. Thanks for showing up today and for sharing so much.
Oh, thank you, Jay. Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this, and we do webinars and we write articles and we do more traditional presentations. But I just it's less common to have the chance to have a real conversation around these issues. And yeah, like you say, everyone has in their organizational life some version of these challenges around case development and donor messaging. So would love to hear ideas and questions and scenarios in the chat, and we can dig into all of it.
Excellent. Well, and before we do any of that, I didn't even say where you were from. So for those who didn't read the entire blurb for this session, of course, you're the managing director of communications at Campbell and Company. What does all of that mean? First of all, I want to encourage people to look up Campbell and Company. Sure. If you don't know the firm, you'll want to learn more about them, and we'll make sure to provide a link in the chat. It's really an exceptional fundraising consultancy. But your work, tell us about all that you do. What's the nature of your
Sure. Yeah, so I'm based in Chicago. Campbell and Company is a national firm. We have a headquarters in Chicago and another headquarters in Seattle, and then we have folks spread far and wide, especially in our mostly remote era today. I've been with the firm for 17 years, which is alarming. It was my second job out of college. I wanted to, I was looking for a writing path. I joined the firm in what was then just kind of like an entry-level business writing job. I thought that sounded good. Do some writing, good causes, be around smart people, collaborate. And the firm at that point didn't really do communication services, but all our clients needed it. Every fundraising campaign needs communications, branding, messaging, materials, all that stuff. So we just started figuring out how to how to do it and how to bring that in-house. And that's kind of been my story at the firm. We've built up a really amazing communications team that I mean, that's what's kept me there for so many years, is the chance to work with our team. We have writers, we have designers, we have brilliant, consultants and thinkers. And for me, the joy is just getting to collaborate and getting to learn so many different causes and missions and organizations and communities, and kind of have that new puzzle every week. And yeah, so our work, and really my work over that time, centers around case development, around campaign communications, campaign branding. We do message coaching and training for boards and leaders, and getting everyone comfortable talking about giving and philanthropy. We do some communication strategy. We do some organizational branding, some other garden variety nonprofit communications, annual reports, things like that. But really the core of it all is writing, messaging, and design focused on the intersection of fundraising and communications.
I know we're going to talk a lot about the case, and I want to jump into that. I do want to ask you, because you talked about 17 years coming almost straight out of school, but that business communications piece, how communications have changed. And I know that's not the bulk of what we're going to be talking about today, but for those who have been in the field for 5 minutes or for 15 years or so, they've probably seen some changes. What's the biggest one that you've seen?
That's interesting. So, most of when I take a question like that, I feel like I want to clarify, a lot of our expertise is going to focus around campaigns. So I'm a little more distant from what's changed in annual giving and, direct mail, online giving. We have practice areas in those. My personal area of focus has always been campaign case development. So, I mean, one of the things that actually comes to mind first is just changing the delivery format and vehicle of case development. When I joined this field, your case statement was invariably a 15-page Word document, and I can't think of the last time we wrote one of those. We are doing all of this work in presentation formats. We are using more conversational, out loud speaking language. We're using PowerPoint. We're using outlines of key messages. We're trying to work with organizations to get to the heart of their messaging in an out loud conversational or presentation format versus a long form written format. There's still a place for that when you need a brochure, you need, sort of more traditional print collateral. But we've just found that saying the words out loud gets you to clearer, more direct messaging. And it also supports a more healthy consensus building process. If you have to bring your board or a committee along with case development, it's better to do it out loud in a room focused on the key messages versus like by email in a 15-page Word document with everyone doing track changes and line editing.
Yeah, I'm glad I asked you that question now, because there may be people with us today for whom their whole context of this is this printed document, and it's good to hear about the ability that you have in building a message that works to make that available to people in ways that they can receive it, and the ways that are best for people to carry it. And I know one of the things we're probably going to be talking about is that push and pull as you're arming, or enabling is probably a better word, board members, executive leaders, and people like that to be able to go out with confidence and represent a message. It's not just something they're going to pull out of their jacket or out of a briefcase, if anybody has one anymore, but rather it's something that they can verbalize. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that reflects our sense of, in a campaign, so much of the giving is driven by major gifts, and major gifts are driven by conversations. And if you want your board members to get off the sidelines and go make their calls and do that, relationship building work, join you in cultivation work, help open doors, they need to feel confident that they know how to tell that story out loud in a room to a person they have actual relationship stakes with. And so, it's just and if you aren't able to equip them with that, and you give them a 15-page document, that may not make them feel more confident. It may make them feel, oh gosh, I have to really study up. I have to memorize all this before I can go do this work. And we know how that shows up. They get a little evasive and they don't make their calls, or so a lot of this is around how can we serve this up for leaders, volunteers, and frontline staff to feel comfortable and confident going out there and making their calls.
Yeah, yeah. So as we jump in, Andy, I want to, if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of poll, at least in the chat, the folks here with us today to find out if they have a case or not, and maybe if they do not have one,
Mm.
are they thinking about developing one, and particularly are they thinking about developing one for a campaign? It might be helpful to hear that as we talk about this, because we've already seen as people listed the kinds of organizations they're with, not just where they're located, but also what you do, that maybe the messaging might be a little bit different. Perhaps even the preparation for this material might be different. So if you would just let us know in the chat whether or not you have a case, and if you're in the process of either redeveloping or developing a case for the first time, if that's for the campaign in mind. Now, I know that we framed this, and you did this beautifully, about 5 pitfalls. So obviously, you've managed to see and avoid these terrible pitfalls in the road. Can you tell us what are those? First of all, why did you come up with that thought about the 5 pitfalls, and then help us to frame those a little bit?
I mean, we doing this for hundreds of organizations. You start to, what's the line? I think it's Tolstoy. Every happy family is the same, but every unhappy family is unhappy in a different way. Like all our challenges are unique, and every organization has its own set of challenges, but there really are some echoes and rhymes between them. And these are just the 5 things I wanted to kind of task myself to, like, what are, if I had to make a top 5 of these, like, gremlins that we that we come up against. And and this is whether you're in a campaign or you're between campaigns, you're doing messaging for annual fund. I tried to keep this somewhat universal. And there a lot of them boil down to not being clear enough, and the different ways we need to push to get to clarity. And they're also but I wanted to share these because I think if you can sort of sensitize yourself to start listening for and hearing and recognizing these, then you can dodge them or deal with them, and or even better, avoid them in advance.
So what's number 1? And are these in any particular order, or are they just 5 gremlins that keep tumbling out of the closet in their own order?
I think number 1 is definitely number 1. And that is fuzzy vision. And this certainly comes up a lot in campaigns and major giving, where if you're asking someone for a kind of an of the moment smaller gift, a quick response gift, an annual gift, they don't need as much from you or from your case. They need maybe an emotional hook and a call to action, and a sense of kind of what the meaning of that gift is going to be for them. But when you're talking about a 5, 6, 7, 8-figure gift, you're getting into that major level. The donor expects that you're delivering some kind of bigger idea. And we call that, the vision, the campaign vision, your philanthropic vision, or your strategic vision. And when you're lacking that, the symptoms of that, it shows up in different ways. Your prospects, we'll hear this all the time when we're doing feasibility studies. We'll go out there with a list of projects to test. And what the donors will say is, well, that's all good stuff. That's nice, all nice to have. But I don't get a sense of vision from this. It feels like a laundry list. It feels like just, here's some stuff. So if you're hearing that, that's a clue that the vision element might be weak. If you're hearing sort of this is good, but why now? What's the spark? Why do I, this is good, but why is it urgent? That's often a clue that the vision isn't clear enough. If you're hearing, if people go straight into nitpicky comments about details or questions about projects, and you're getting right into the weeds right away, sometimes that's a clue that maybe we didn't engage them on the big idea or the vision level. So you can be sensitized to this in a lot of ways, and you can hear it in a lot of ways. But with major giving and campaigns in particular, we have a real duty, I think, to convey what does this all add up to, and what is the like three ways you can think about it. Well, like, what does it all add up to? If you got a list of projects, campaign with a bunch of different things, what is the thread that weaves them all together, or what does it all add up to in terms of one big idea? Or you can think about it in terms of before and after. What is going to be different in the world, in the community, in our mission after this campaign or your gift? Third way to think about it is just the picture it in your head test. When we say vision, there's a clue there that is the word is vision. It's a visual language. Like, can you picture the outcome of your gift in your head, or does it feel conceptual or too convoluted? So yeah, this tends to be an area that you really have to push on, because you can write 10 pages or you can produce a deck with 20 slides in it and you can have a ton of content, but oftentimes the hardest thing is to keep pushing on it until it really feels like one big idea comes out of it. And I could think through some examples of that, but that's really what we mean by vision. And it's the most common thing that organizations struggle with. And it's maybe the thing we spend the most time on in our work is, we've got the plans down, got the details down, but let's push and push until the vision feels clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you how much of this is about, I don't know, boiling down all the ingredients to a roux so that it's really clear and tasty, and how much is so that maybe that's a bit of the poetry, but it has to come from the vision, from the ingredients, and how much of this is about searching for the why, for lack of a better term.
There's different ways you can satisfy the need for vision around major giving. One is definitely, as you say, like finding the thing that makes it all add up to more than the sum of the parts. So we were working with an independent school once, and they had already done a campaign that was very academically focused, fixed up all their classrooms. Their next campaign, they needed to build this new performing arts center and the track, and then this like outdoor amphitheater space. So it was like track and field, athletics, performing arts, and this like gathering commons amphitheater space. So we're like, oh, what do you do with that? That's like, it's like one of those like cooking challenges where they give you like 3 ingredients that have nothing to
in a
do
basket,
with
right? Exactly.
But we kept listening and thinking about it, and we realized like, oh, like this is about all the learning that happens outside the classroom. And if you think about your own school experience, you think about the things that were most transformational for you. It might have been a teacher, it might have been a class, but it's just as likely to have been a coach or your band director. For me, it was high school band director, or a public speaking thing, or a extracurricular, a play that you were part of that gave you confidence. So what's transformational for young people in school is just as likely to be outside the classroom as in. And the message of this campaign was, with our community support, we just did major improvements on our academic offerings. Now it's time to invest in all the learning that happens outside the classroom. So, it was like finding the thread. Sometimes it is more about going to the outside world. I think you were getting at that. Like, get out of your head of like why we want to do these projects or why they are part of our strategic roadmap, and say, why does the world need this from us right now? we've been working with lots of performing arts organizations, theaters, symphonies, museums, and those organizations have been through it over the last 5 years. And many of them are still in recovery mode. Many of them are launching campaigns that are really about sustainability and recapitalizing their operating model. So but you don't really want to go out with a campaign that's like, help us pay off debt and balance our books and recapitalize our operating model. But you have to be able to, a lot of those clients for us are finding a message that's around, why does the world need theater right now? Why at a time of division is it powerful for people to sit in a room together and experience human storytelling that raises questions, that raises dialogues, that lets us listen and hear and be together and stimulate conversation that highlights our common humanity. So in that kind of campaign, the vision might be, as simple as like, the world needs a theater like ours thriving and well for the next generation. And that's what this campaign is about. And we're going to invest in this whole laundry list of particulars, but you can almost ignore the particulars. This is really about the larger proposition of, does society need a theater like this? Does our city need that for the civic health and life of our community?
When you were working on something like that, you were working as the consultant to the organization. There was probably an internal discussion as well as the discussion you were having maybe with your team or in your own head as a writer or communications professional. But I'm wondering how you help people to get there. I mean, especially when you have a lot of different, and you may talk about this later, but when you're thinking about consensus, but there were probably people, for example, the people who are behind the athletics part of that campaign, those who are behind the performing arts part, and they may all like each other, but there might be a little bit of competition there, or a sense that we can't do all things. So I want to make sure that my kids or my program gets the resources it needs. And so they lean into that. How difficult is it, whether you're doing it internally or whether you're doing it as outside counsel, to get people to say, no, this is really about the whole. And we've got to make sure that when we talk about the HVAC system, we're expressing something that's really about why this is important, not just an expense.
I like doing campaigns for boring stuff. It feels like a fun creative challenge, and it's just like, all right, the school needs a new boiler. Like, let's see what we can do with this. That actually gets to one of the other, when I was thinking about these, like, what are the top 5 pitfalls? One of the other ones is definitely consensus building, and that is full of snares and traps and things that you can get hung up on. And so what you're getting at is the challenge of it's not just we have to have a great idea and write it down in the best language. Like, a case needs to be used by and mobilized by board members, your campaign committee, your development committee, certainly your frontline fundraising staff, your executive leadership needs to feel very at home with that case. You probably want other people around, just other public facing people, even your front of house staff or your faculty in a school. You want broad ownership of your philanthropic message. Not everybody needs to be scripted on it and have a really detailed knowledge of it. But if you want a culture of philanthropy, you want all those folks to have some fluency in your case. So yeah, the way we what we think is important to approach that is to bring anyone you want to have ownership of your case needs to be brought in from the process of developing it. So often on the front end, that's listening, doing interviews and workshops and kind of focus groups to just ask people their aspirations for the organization. How, if you're talking to program staff, you're talking to the athletic director, dig into the athletics project, but also ask how that connects to the school's larger mission and to where, how the school is meeting sort of kids' development needs, for the 21st century. Bring in the people, engage them in reviewing drafts. Actually, we have a lot of thoughts about how to manage that. Again, don't just email them a document to do track changes and line edit. That's going to get that's going to be difficult. But if once you have a work in progress or an idea, we think this could be the core message and vision of the campaign. It's it's not final, but let's do a sort of a focus group presentation of that to some of the people who will use the case, to staff, to campaign committee. Let's let them kick it around and play with it. Let's do that live in a conversational setting again versus track changes. And let them see their fingerprints on it as the drafts evolve. So engaging people is really important. The flip side, you can go too far with this. If you can get stuck chasing edits, you can, when the draft says, version 12, final, version 12, I promise this time, like we all know, we've all been through that, but
Right.
at some point you're just delaying the real world use and feedback gathering. Like you're just putting off the moment where you have to go make contact with external reality and see if it works. So, our advice is really we have to invite feedback in a genuine way. We have to honor all the feedback, which doesn't mean taking it literally, but you have to use and interpret and really weigh and consider feedback. But you have to have someone with clear ownership of the process, so that there's someone who is authorized and you have some executive sponsorship to say, this draft is done now. It may not be final forever, but it's good enough for us to go start using, testing out with our donors, seeing what we hear, and getting real world feedback. So it's that balance of leaning into meaningful consensus building without getting trapped in the endless cycle of it. And you have a lot of agency in how to structure that in terms of how you're asking for feedback, what you're doing with it, what expectations you're conveying, so that people understand they're being consulted or they have final approval authority. Where are they in that process? So does that make sense?
I know sometimes that when we work with an organization where no one really wants to take on that executive leadership role in affirming the case, that things can get challenging. It might be helpful to just hear how challenging they can be. So what's the worst case scenario if you don't have a person who really owns the project within the institution? And then how do you make sure that they understand that, so someone does take on that role before you even begin?
Yeah, this is a duty of leadership. I really believe that. I think if this is an organizational communication that expresses this is where we're going, at some point the executive director and the chief development officer, and likely a board member as well, are going to need to say, yes, this is our case, or at least this is our case for now, and we're going to go out and start cultivating and get feedback on it. So there are moments where we will see those folks, because of their good relationship building instincts, they will want to defer to all the voices in a board feedback process. They will want to keep iterating drafts until no board member has a single comment. And I think you understand that is a horizon that will forever recede away from you as you walk toward it. So at some point we do have to kind of ask our clients, we think we're at the point where it would be really meaningful for, when we present this draft, to hear just we will take any feedback, but for the board to hear you say, this has been through this process, this many steps, this is a legitimate product of input. We think we're in a really good place with this. We're getting ready to go out the door. We welcome any final feedback you may have to help us continue to sharpen this. And frame the at some point you have to frame the ask for feedback more that way versus what do we think? Are we on the right track? Or asking for more evaluative feedback. Are we on the right track? Does this work? What do you like? What don't you like? That there's a time and a place for that, but you do have to move beyond that to we're getting ready to go out and start using this. We're excited to engage people around this. Any thoughts or suggestions you have for us are welcome. But the implicit message is the train is leaving the station at some point.
Right. It's funny because if people don't know when the train is leaving the station, to use your analogy, or it seems like the train never leaves, the risk, I guess, in addition, is you dissipate the energy, the momentum toward completion and getting people to embrace and advocate. I mean, it may not be everything they want, nothing ever is, but they can get pretty excited about something if there is a generally unified message advocated for by a recognized leader. So I love that.
Yeah.
Those are just a couple of the gremlins, and there are three more hiding in your closet. So what's the next one that comes to mind?
So yeah, we had fuzzy vision, and then we had kind of consensus building and everything that comes with that.
Right.
Third, I'd throw out fuzzy plans. And this is
Hmm.
another one that this is kind of the flip side to fuzzy vision. Sometimes you have a really clear vision, but it's the projects and investments and work you're actually going to do to implement that isn't quite ready for prime time. And that can show up as you need a building project, but you haven't begun any of the concepting or the planning process for it, or you want to launch or evolve a new kind of programming, and you have the idea for it, but it feels like an idea, not a plan. Or you need to build your endowment, but you aren't really able to answer the next three questions that a donor will have about how does the endowment work, what difference is going to make. So it's when you're at that point of like, we got a vision, we have good ideas, but it doesn't feel shovel ready yet. That's where often there's some more work to do. Um, if you're doing a feasibility study and you're early on in, say, campaign planning, you don't need to have you don't have to have like the full blueprint of every building down to every square foot. It's fine to have ideas still emerging, even as you get into early fundraising. Like, I don't want to convey that everything has to be completely nailed down to go start raising money, but it's more the test is, if I'm the donor, does this feel real, credible, and shovel ready, as we say. So that's different for capital projects versus program investments versus endowments. Even in annual fund, I think it's really useful to be able to say, if you make this gift, that will support concrete things like. But yeah, this is the level of your case where you need to make it feel concrete, tangible, and ready to go. And there's lots of ways to approach that depending on what you're raising money for. But yeah, fuzzy plans can be a hang up, and it can keep your donors at arm's length. It's too easy for them to say at that point, like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. Come back to me when you're come back to me in 6 months when you're further along in your planning.
Yeah, actually, it seems to leave open that door. So it must make a study really difficult. And then I wonder if there's a residual danger that if people think, you weren't really ready when you came and talked to me, do they doubt you the next time you come around as well?
Yeah, it can there's something there. Yeah, it can be a little it can shake trust a little bit if it feels like you're asking for support for half-baked plans. Donors donors can feel that. So sometimes you are out there needing input and needing to do early stage cultivation when the plans are still coming along.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do there is just be clear about it. Say, hey, actually, that can become a positive. You're like, hey, we know we need to renovate and transform this facility. Our staff are working on it. We got early conceptual architectural work going on around it. There's much more to come. We're excited to tell you more about that as that unfolds. Today, we'd just love to ask your input on this plan. We're bringing you in early on this as a sort of a insider. So there are ways to make good relationship building work out of still emerging plans. But when it feels like you're asking for something where obvious questions haven't been answered yet, that can be a trust deflator, I think.
I wonder if this is a point when people are reviewing these pitfalls and they're saying, are we ready to even write this case to go out there in the world and share it to try and position ourselves to raise for a big goal? If this is one which is not a deal killer, but at least it puts them on hold until they resolve the plans. And if so, if that's something that is helpful to discuss first, that you might say, okay, so what is it we're trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? And now, are we really in a position to execute? And then if we're not, what is it they need to do? Do they need to sit down then with the leader of the organization, the chair of the board, and commit to a series of steps so that they can start working on a plan? What you've probably run into this before. What kind of advice then did you give an organization that clearly was very fuzzy in its planning?
Yeah, it's I mean, this is something that we will pause a feasibility study if we feel like it just needs a little more time in the oven. We will say, look, that we don't actually want to waste your time and money going and testing donor feedback on this just yet. Why don't you take 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? If they're in the middle of strategic planning, if they're in the middle of campus planning or, facilities planning, sometimes it's just clear from the jump that like they're like 3 months away from really knowing what this is going to be. And why don't we just wait for that?
Right.
Sometimes that we'll just ask, we'll say, we think your donors are going to have these 5 or 6 questions. Can you, if it's capital planning, can you get, if you need to do a search for a location and that's too much of that's like a question that's going to stand in the way of people engaging with the project. Why don't we try to resolve that question and then we can move forward? Sometimes if it's more programmatic, it's, can you sit down with can you task the program leader for, athletics or whatever, this, if you want to launch this innovation fund and this staff group is going to be responsible for it, could we ask them to write us up a little 2-page concept paper for it? Doesn't have to be well written. We'll work on that side of it, but that just answers, what is this? How's it going to work? What is the funding need? How will the funds be managed? How will it deliver impact? These kinds of planning questions. So yeah, we will often kind of bounce those questions back to an organization, and sometimes it takes a week and sometimes it takes 6 months to answer them. But it's really about just understanding that donors are going to, anticipating the questions that donors are going to have, and that when donors ask those kinds of questions, that's a good sign. It means they're into the idea and they're like actually taking it seriously. They're kind of kicking the tires of it. So you don't want to lose momentum at that stage. You want to be able to say, oh yeah, here we're working on that. Here's our plan for that. Here's how we're going to take this program from serving 500 families to serving 2,000 families, or whatever the plan may be.
And you did mention budget in the middle of that. So just a pinpoint question, which is how important is it to have some kind of budget? It may not be the very final budget because you're testing a case, presumably initially. Yeah. How important is it to have a budget?
I think it's very important to have an order of magnitude and a ballpark early on. Some donors will want to see, as part of their, like, if they're some donors will want to see the line item budget. If they're asking for that, again, I think that's a very good sign that they're emotionally bought in and their rational brain is just trying to sign off on the decision. So I think you want to be able to convey the overall scale of the investment. That can be at a fairly broad level. We need $10 million to build out, to transform this area of the zoo into a new multi-species habitat that will achieve these different benefits for visitors and for the animals. Like, or, we know that this is going to be a $5 million investment to take this, youth serving program from this scale to this over the next 5 years. And because what that does is it shows planning, it shows credibility, and it provides a context for the donor to understand the impact of their gift. If you're asking for, it's hard to ask for a $1 million gift for a $1 million program, but if you can convey, this is a $5 million initiative, your gift of $2 million is going to break this whole thing wide open and get the other, and help us raise the rest of the money. And you will be, we're not just asking you to carry the whole thing, but you can be a leader in your gift to, through kind of this, people understand their gift in proportion to a goal.
Right. Now I know you have two more things in the closet, and as we close in on, I realize we've been talking for 45 minutes, and these things you've talked about are really important, but there are two more, and I also want to invite folks, if they have specific questions that apply to their work, to go ahead and write them in. We have one that's been sitting in the Q&A for a bit, just asking about templates or formats that you prefer, and I don't know if you want to touch on that or not. You did go through kind of a litany of different ways to take this content and deliver it. But do you want to approach that, Andy, before we jump into the last two gremlins?
Yeah, and let's as my colleague says, feed two birds with one scone, because we're trying to avoid unnecessarily violent language. So I'll take the template or format question along with one of the other challenges we see is fuzzy language. And I think writing in a Word document that's 15 pages long, I like that. I'm a reader, I'm a writer. I like long form magazine articles. That's I love all that stuff. But when you have 15 pages to work with, there is no pressure on you to be clear or to be direct or to get to the point. So that shows up in jargon, it shows up in passive voice, it shows up in boring writing and just like taking too long and being too indirect. So the language challenge we give ourselves is say it out loud. Does it sound like something a human being would say to another human being? Or does it sound like weird nonprofit jargon, adjectival language? And my ultimate tip on this is literally try to write it without any adjectives. Like try to write and because then you can't say, we offer a child-centered, transformational, holistic education. That's all adjectives. If you take the adjectives out of that, there's all that's left in the sentence is we offer an education. So you have to you take the adjectives out, you have to look at what is the actual action that you are delivering, which might be, we change lives. We give every child every chance to discover who they can become. We open up possibilities for whatever the core transformational thing is that you do. You'll key into it with nouns and verbs. And then you can put some adjectives back in as needed where it's necessary to clarify. So the fuzzy language pitfall or gremlin is endemic. To get back to the template or format question, I'll tell you exactly what we use. We use an undesigned, ugly as sin PowerPoint. We just, for case development, we do a PowerPoint deck, black and white, no images, no design, no branding, just words on a page. Typically just one main idea per slide and then some supporting talking points in the notes. And that's kind of the test we put it to. If we can't deliver a case out loud in an undesigned, ugly PowerPoint deck of just white text on a black screen and have it resonate, then the language isn't clear enough, it's not direct enough, and we need to push harder on it. So, we get that version. That's the version we will take through staff review, leadership review, board review. And then we'll bring in design and photography and bring it all to life and make it more donor friendly. But we really try to get the words on page in a version you got to stand and say out loud and feel like a human being while you're saying it.
And it sounds pretty brief.
Yeah. I mean, there's a 5-minute version, a 2-minute version, a 10-minute version. If it's complicated, some of these decks get long just because there's lots of projects, but even when you have a long deck, you're still thinking about what's the short version.
Right. And then number 5.
Number 5 is, look, we got to be honest with ourselves. Our first instinct in case writing is to just kind of tell you why we think we're worthy of support and not think from the donor's mindset of what is the meaning of this act of giving? What is the impact and meaning of this gift? So I think of that, the way that I feel that is when a case or a draft feels like all push and no pull. Like it just, if you read something, you can feel this as a reader. And it feels like it's just pushing things at you. It's arguing the case versus like bringing you in, or it's, we're just, if you look, this shows up, you look at the first page of the case and it's just, we were founded in 1909 and here are our accreditations and here are our exemplary things. You know, in healthcare and higher ed, we're going to write a bunch of boring stuff about excellence. And like, when you open that up as a reader and it's just that kind of stuff being pushed at you, I mean, you might care about it, but you don't care yet. So that's push. Pull to me is when you understand what is motivating or emotionally engaging for your audience and you start there. So that's typically starting, like you were saying earlier, Jay, like starting from something going on in the world, starting from the way you affect lives, what's going on in the people's lives that you touch, what's going on in your community, what is needed from you, or what is the exciting momentum that your work has that is leading toward this, you know, exciting next level. It typically means starting from a more emotional engagement, starting from a human engagement, starting from community or world versus like you paint a picture of the world or the community and you get people emotionally engaged around that. And then enter the hero, our organization. We are prepared to do something about this. We have a plan. We have a vision. We have, then you can talk about your credentials, why you are a trustworthy organization to kind of do that job. But when we start from just what's great about our organization, that's all push, no pull. So that's the fifth pitfall that we see. I think people just, we don't even realize we're doing it. It's just kind of what comes natural. You start writing, you know, why should someone give to us? Well, because of, you know, our many meritorious qualities.
Wow, it sounds almost like it comes from a position, and I know it's never intentional, but to the reader, it might almost sound like entitlement. Like we've done all these
Yeah.
great things, therefore you should help us to do more great things, rather than here are the great things that we can do together, the things that, you know, that matter to you. So it's about you, it's not about us.
Yeah. 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 It can have that vibe. And, you know, we work with, for every client that has that problem, we work with other organizations that have the, I love my nice Catholic clients that are culturally averse to bragging about themselves. Like they
Sure.
just, you know, or I grew up in Minnesota, so that's like, that's kind of my people too. It's like, we're just, we are, we are uncomfortable bragging about ourselves. And, you know, sometimes you err on that side too, where you're not comfortable bringing in your track record. But I think when you find yourself starting from like a story about the organization versus a story about people or the world or the community, that's usually a good clue that um, it'll be stronger if you start from the world or a person or the community and then bring your organization in at the, yeah, at the point where you enter the picture.
Yeah, yeah, and then I guess invite them to be a part of that picture if they're not already, or for the new vision that you're articulating.
Mhm.
We have a great question from the audience, and before I jump into Carolyn's question, I just want to let folks know that we have a kind of a special session coming up on Tuesday with the new president and CEO of Helen Brown Group, and that's a change just recently. Helen Brown, a good friend, personal friend, and a friend of the series, has passed the reins to her colleague and friend Melissa Banks Stepno, who's been in the field a long time. She's doing a session on 5 things your organization can do to maximize donor advised fund gift opportunities. That's on Tuesday. I hope you'll join us for that to both welcome her in a discussion about donor advised funds, which are so important, as well as and because of her new role. That'll be a lot of fun. So Carolyn had asked this great question about what are the core components. You've been going through all the pitfalls,
Yeah.
but some people who are writing this for the first time may not know what to include. In fact, maybe that's the reason, at least some of us, and I've fallen into that trap too, I'm sure in the past, of saying we were founded in, and this is what we did, because we think that that's what we're supposed to do, is say, this is why we're here and look how good we are. But what are the core components? You just talked about story a little bit, the
Yeah.
emotionality. What are the things that you always look for on those PowerPoint slides?
Yeah, we actually have a framework for this, and a number of resources around this. We look for 6 elements of a case for support. I say that it sounds like a lot, and so let me like and I just linked. Thank you, Jack. A blog post where we set some of this up. Let me just make sure that link works before. Yeah, there we go.
And
During the
I'll
pandemic,
take
we
the liberty, Andy, of sharing that for people who might be watching the recording later. That's something you can find at Campbell and Company's website, campbellandcompany.com. And it's a resource for the 6 elements of your case for support. You want to take a look for that.
yeah. So this is, you know, if you're writing an annual fund appeal letter, you don't need to necessarily weave in all 6 of these, but for a complete major gift cultivation cycle and the more extended communication that you have around more significant gifts, we typically you're going to want to have these 6 elements covered. So they're covered in that blog piece and then also some of our other webinars, but the context. So like what is setting the context in the world, the community, in time, in history, painting that external picture around your issue, why what you're doing matters now. Context is number 1. Impetus is number 2. That's the start, the spark, the why now, the urgency that can come from more positive, aspirational, hope and opportunity type framings. It can come from more threat and fear and negative based framings. That's less common in campaigns, more common in annual fund or political fundraising, certainly. But you know, you have to give that spark of urgency. So the first 2 are really setting the stage with context and impetus. The second 2 are the ones we talked about earlier, vision and plan. So what's the big idea of what we're doing, and what is the plan or the set of projects and initiatives that gets us there? The 5th element is credential. So that is where the like about us, why are we the right person for the job? Why are we the right organization to do this work? That's where your track record, your trustworthiness, your accreditations and awards, your documented impact, that's where that all comes in. And then the last one is you can't forget the ask in these things. It's the appeal. You ever like write a whole case and then realize, oh, we wrote everything we needed to say, but we forgot to put in the ask. Surprisingly common. So yeah, a complete major donor communication is gonna cover kind of the why, the what, and the who of this. So the why is, yeah, context, impetus, what's going on in the world that makes this important. The what is vision and plan. What are we doing and putting forward that's going to make a difference? And then credential and the donor appeal. That's kind of like how am I as the donor and the organization going to like partner together and make meaningful change in part through giving.
I love all of that, and I'm also impressed that you went through the 6 elements, and you never made a reference to Milo Jovanovic and Bruce Willis in the 5th element.
Yeah.
But for anybody who watches that kind of stuff, but that's really helpful context, because we've been talking about these pitfalls, but now we have a frame of reference for where those things might fail us if we don't pay attention. And so I really do appreciate that. And I want to call everybody's attention to that link once again, so you can just click on that and take a look for those. And if people want to learn more about your work, Andy, follow your work, how can people do that? How can they learn more about Campbell and Company, but also specifically communications?
I mean, our website is kind of our front door. You can find me on there and reach out to me. My email and contact information is there. I love to bounce ideas and share. We got a million articles and blogs and webinars that dig into all this stuff. We love to share what we're doing and how we're thinking about all these things. So please hit me up with any questions. We probably have resources we can send your way. Our LinkedIn channel is also pretty active. Please find me there, and I'm always happy to connect and share ideas there. So yeah, we try to, as we learn and we do more of this work and things come up, we try to connect the dots, see what common issues we're coming up against, and share it out. So hope this something in there is useful to you on one level or another.
I'm sure it is. We all need to make our case, and but knowing how to do it, that's another thing altogether. So really do appreciate the advice here, both for what to do and what not to do. So everybody do take a look for the other work that Andy and his team do at Campbell & Company. If you do follow the series, you'll see we've done a few other things on case statements from different perspectives. Nobody today, we were anticipating somebody might ask about using maybe AI support tools in order to draft case statements. I'm sure Andy would have a lot to say about that. We're really talking today about doing the real hard work of putting our heads together and making great things happen when we come up with a common vision and articulate it in a clear, persuasive, and relatively brief way. So my appreciation to you, Andy, for taking us through that. To everybody else who hung out with us today, those who are watching in the recording, and hopefully you'll join us for the sessions we have coming up in the weeks to come. So until then, thanks so much. Take care. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everyone.